Welcome to APPA's weekly webinar. My name is Billy Zadig, Standards and Codes Administrator for APPA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to APPA's webpage later this afternoon. You'll receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the webpage where all webinar recordings are housed, as well as links to our upcoming webinars and town halls. We have webinars planned out through the middle of December, and they are open for registration. Professional continuing education credits and AIA-CLU credits are being offered for today's program. If you are an AIA professional requiring a certificate, please send an email to me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, @appa.org, along with your AIA membership number if you have not done so in the past. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box, and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Deke Smith. Deke, take it away.
And good morning. And I know you've probably all read the description and the learning objectives, so we won't spend any time on that because we do have a lot of material to cover. It's great to be here today with you all. And let's say we have a lot to go through, so hopefully we'll be able to cover everybody's concerns and issues and things like that. What we're looking at in a lot of this now is really we're talking about a culture change. We want to get people to start thinking in life cycle and not first cost alone. And that's what we've been trying to do with TCO. That's really what we're doing with building information modeling. And I do see a lot of relationships between the issues that we have in both of those situations, both of those areas. The total cost of ownership, we're going to talk about that a little bit in this session. We've got more education and training that we're going to try to put together for total cost of ownership, for the APPA total cost of ownership program and the standard and everything over time. And so we'll have more on that. There's also a lot of work that's going on right now with use cases, and we'll talk about use cases. It's basically the basis of information architecture. Use cases lead to what in building smart terms or IDMs, information delivery manuals. And so what we want to do is we'll talk about how those relate to the total cost of ownership and how you really kind of use those to be able to gather information and what are those information sources that you can use. The other thing is, and of course, you know, international application of all of this. This is not just you know, for colleges, universities, or just in the United States, but this has certainly implications worldwide. And then also, I think, as we're going through, and everybody's quite aware, not only do we need TCO education, but also BIM education. And I've been doing some work in that area, and so I do want to touch on that a little bit. And again, it ties back to the use cases and back to really getting TCO in place in general. You know, my motivation for all this is that, you know, what I see, and I think everybody sees, everything, almost everything today exists electronically, but we haven't figured out a great way to continue to keep it in a usable format. You know, we either print it out on paper, and so it has to be read back in, or we even turn it into a PDF, which makes it harder to use. But how do we keep information in a usable format and then keep it in a trusted environment? And we're addressing that both in BIM and in TCO. The other thing is all these things linked together, not only BIM and TCO, but also there's a big effort going on right now of linking in GIS. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with COBE, but the concept there, all four of those items are life cycle oriented. It's, you know, capturing information one time, reusing it multiple times. That, you know, if you've gotten the standard, hopefully many of you have purchased the standard. We'll provide information on how to do that later if you haven't. But we do go through and having everybody using a common standard then allows information collected for every project that you do to be collected in the same way. So you can go back and compare And as we say, we're going to talk a lot about reserve studies and things like that as we get through the session today, so that you're capturing information on all your facilities, not only just new facilities, but all existing facilities in a common way, so that you can use that. And I think personally, TCO will really provides the metrics we need to be able to demonstrate value of BIM and GIS and COBie and all these different things. And again, it's just getting people to think in a life cycle approach, and we'll talk about that. And of course, I think as you get into TCO, you recognize that TCO, the more data you have, the better. And BIM can certainly provide that information. And there's things that are happening with BIM now that aren't just related to new buildings, but also with existing buildings too. So with that, we'll kind of look at what can you do immediately. And I think anything we're doing right now, it really and certainly the first phase of TCO is really having a good asset management strategy. You've got to be able to understand your assets before you can really get any further. And so that's why we really kind of started that in that area with TCO also. And again, you can think in plan for the next 25 years. And even though you might not have, your budgets might not be approved on more than an annual or semi-annual or twice every 2 years, you can still go ahead and think in that bigger picture. I know I worked in the federal government, and the Constitution even says you can't have a budget longer than 2 years. That's why the budgets are set up that way. And a lot of companies operate the same way. But that doesn't mean you can't think over 25, 50, 100 years of life cycles for a facility. And planning in that kind of mode is going to be a far better approach, and make your organization more sustainable. Be able to look out into the future, overcome those peaks and valleys and things that we have out there. Because some years a lot of things have to be replaced, other years not so many things. So maintenance and think about the maintenance even before construction starts. While you're doing the design to maintain is a concept that really makes a lot of sense. But if you're only thinking first cost, you only say, okay, well I'm going to get the cheapest cheapest product out there. Or lowest first cost, let's put it that way, instead of just saying cheap. But it's not necessarily, that may be a huge mistake as time goes on when you have to maintain this thing. And our regular program on TCO talks a lot about that too, what looks to be free is not necessarily free. Then the other thing is, look at condition assessments, figure out what the mean time before failure is, predict that. It may not come true exactly all the time that way. I know even and I'll talk about this a couple times probably, is our homeowners association. I manage the pool. Well, we have our main pump motor on the pool, was supposed to be replaced by our reserve study indicated, our reserve study indicated it should have been replaced about 5 years ago. It was still functioning fine. So we just put it in the budget. And then when this year, actually, we did need to replace it. But those are kind of things that at least you're prepared and you're ready for these things. And the other thing is, you got to track that warranty information and do the required maintenance. Or if something does fail and the manufacturer asks you to show that you did the maintenance and you can't show that, then you're ending up buying a new product. And a lot of times too, people don't keep track of the warranty, and something breaks and then they go out and buy it new, and then they find out later that, oh gee, it was still under warranty. So those are all important things. And I think the other piece that it's kind of interesting is, facilities, if you don't do anything at all, they depreciate, or if you're taking care of them and things, they're going to automatically depreciate it between 1% to 4% per year. But without maintenance, I should say, that's with maintenance, but without maintenance, it's twice that rate, 2 to 8%. So, in a very short period of time, you can render your facility unable to meet its mission. Okay, so let's get into some more things here as far as, and these won't be all, what I'm going to try to do is get a lot of the concepts out first, and then we'll talk about the details and, give you some graphics as to how all this stuff goes. But I just want to get, like say, some of what drives me, what makes me think about how all these things relate, and so hopefully you'll be able to, we'll reinforce these as we go. So we want to create business processes so that you can repeat these on a regular basis. If you have business processes, then you can also implement change management, and you can figure out if something doesn't work the way you anticipated. You go through a root cause analysis and see how you can improve that and constantly improve it. And I can talk about that all day with some projects that we worked in the past. But you want to set goals, and if you set goals for the future, like, okay, in 5 years, I want to be in this position. But you also have to identify what today's benchmark is, and then capture metrics along the way that shows that you're actually improving. You can capture this information, you can sustain this as you capture the information, then you build sustainment into the business process. So, if, say, with a work order, you can't close your work order until you capture the data about it that says, okay, I maintained this filter, or I replaced this pump, or whatever, and you can't close the work order until that information is recorded back into your information base. One thing we'll talk about is information thread and digital twins, so I won't get into that too much right now. And then I think but one of the key elements, and this is really one of the basic tenets, is you enter data one time, and it comes from the authoritative source. Who is the person that really, create that information initially, whether it's be it design, whether it's during construction, whether it's during maintenance or whatever. Who is the authoritative source? Capture from them. Don't have other people continually going out and collecting the data again, because they may not know what all the where it came from and things like that. So if everybody in your organization is working from common data, common facts, then you can make decision making actually works better then also, because everybody's not working from their own set of facts. So that common data, but again, if you are using common data, you also have to have security and integrity of the information, and that's one of the a lot of the a big part of the TCO concept is about data integrity, and we'll talk about that too. So the concept of digital twin is it may be a piece of equipment, it may be a whole building, or your entire portfolio. That you have the digital, all the information. You can do simulations. You can go through and simulate what happens. If I've got these 4 pumps here, how can I take one offline and still be able to use the others? What was the design intent in putting these things together? And you can, if you have a BIM, you can capture this information as you're building the building, not only from the design level, but then when you get into construction and you actually decide what the model number and even what the serial number is on these different devices. Because what we found, and when I was working with the Navy, I was deputy director for Y2K Ashore. And one of the things, we went out and captured information about all these different pieces of equipment, and we found that it was important to know the serial number, because they used different products at different times when they were manufacturing this a particular model of a piece of equipment. And so they are going to have different products. They're going to have different things if you're going to replace things and stuff like that. It's gonna change over time. The other thing is just talking about the individual. There's a concept that's been around for a little while, and there are some papers and things being written about it now. It's creating the T-shaped practitioner. We talk a lot about, a lot of times we have kind of the depth of knowledge in your discipline. If you're a structural engineer, you have a lot of knowledge about structural engineering. If you're if you're an air conditioning mechanic, you have a lot of information about air conditioning. But what we also want to do is not just have depth in that one area, because that creates what we call silos. in the industry. So you're not necessarily understanding what the role of the different people are in that whole process. So you also have to have a breadth of knowledge in the industry to be able to understand just how do you fit in with the rest of the picture. Who is the authoritative source that's creating some of this information that you could go to so you don't have to go out and spend all your time recreating information that somebody else has already created. So I think that's like I say, that's it's been around for a little while, certainly, but it's certainly I think a concept that's really worth spending some time and trying to make sure that people understand that big picture. And I know it's not always easy. When I was a supervisor, I'd try to get people to understand what other people were doing, and some people liked it, some people didn't. So it's kind of something you have to, again, it's a culture change. We're talking about all this stuff is really a culture change. I think we've seen this model at different levels. I like this one because you go out and acquire data, you process it into information, you analyze it and becomes knowledge, you communicate it, it becomes intelligence, you apply it to make decisions, you formulate it into specific actions, but it doesn't have value until you implement it. So I think carrying this through the whole, I know Doug Christensen had a smaller model version of this, but I really like this. It seems to go through that whole process of starting with just the details and then summarizing it all the way to the top. And that's another one of my principles is that you can always summarize detail, but you can't go the other way. So it's important to capture that detail, and then you can put it together in lots of different ways over time to meet various needs that you have. But you've got to have it in a raw, detail level. That used to be a big problem when you couldn't store a lot of data. Now we can store data. You can't hardly buy a computer without a terabyte of information. Not that you want to have a terabyte of information on your computer, you probably want it to have it up in the cloud. And actually the cloud is more secure than having the data sitting on your own computer because it's all encrypted and things like that. So there's a lot of, we won't get into cybersecurity today either, but that's another big aspect of all of this. So getting into the project lifecycle, I kind of like this diagram where it talks a little bit about time that's related to all these things too. So you've got planning, and you've got probably a 5-year plan out for your organization. Then once you decide, okay, yeah, I want to do it, then you go into design, and design doesn't happen overnight. Now the problem is, from an owner's point of view, as soon as the plan has been decided that this is the way we want to go, it's delayed gratification until they actually get the facility in place. So that's where the design and construction industry kind of is at odds a lot of times with the owner because, hey, I want that now. I'm going through the same thing with a deck I'm putting on the back of my house now. I have to replace my deck. And I've been in the county trying to get approval for the permit for about 5 months now, partially because of the COVID problem, but it's just slowing down everything. But I want that deck. I want to be able to go out and sit out there and enjoy the evening or something like that. So once you've built it, it takes a while to build some of these things, especially big infrastructure projects and things like that. And this does apply both to vertical as well as horizontal construction. And that's BIM applies also to both as well as TCO. So, but then you're going to operate it for 100 years maybe. Then you're going to, improve it and things like that. I mean, how many universities and all have facilities that are more than 100 years old? And you're still using them. And in a lot of cases, they've been completely, upgraded and they really look pretty nice inside. And they're modern facilities inside the exterior skin that's been there for 100 years. And then eventually you're going to, replace it. You're going to decommission it. You're going to deconstruct it. You can do all kinds of different things at the end of its life. And we'll talk about that more too. So, why are models important? I think it's important to understand that holistic, the whole building, and you can use them in all different phases. I think, personally, they haven't been used much for sustainment. A lot of times people are asking for models and then they may get a model delivered and they never use it. You know, we've gone and consulted with different companies and stuff like that that have models in several buildings. They've never opened the models, and they wanted to go out and capture information. We say, hey, I think you already have it. And so we went in and found the information. They said, oh my gosh, we didn't even realize we had all this stuff. So, you know, we want to improve interoperability, because that's going to reduce the delivery time. You can, in fact, have a less expensive facility delivered quicker in a higher quality product. You can have all three. It's been demonstrated. I've got examples of people that have accomplished that in big projects and small projects, hospitals, things like that. It also allows you to have the collaboration between the different stakeholders. And again, going back to the more people are those T-shaped learners where they understand the whole scope of the project, the better off the more collaboration you're going to be able to get, because you know what's available in different places. And again, you know, we're not duplicating work. You know, if you have information, and you know, you can reduce the number of trips for a work order, because you can find out what the problem might be or what the model might be or things like that. Take the pieces of you know, the parts with you that may need to go, you know, that may be failed, that you might have to replace, and so you only have to make one trip instead of first going out and finding what you've got or what the problem is, and then going out and making another trip to get it. Or in some cases, you even have to go out and order stuff. Have some stuff on hand, and you know, anything you can do to reduce those trips, to reduce the amount of time. And again, we see from design that people, you know, are building something that, you know, is harder to maintain. You know, if you design to maintain, then you can go through and take a look and see, you know, maybe it only takes half the amount of time to get to something to replace it or something like that. And then the other thing is, if you have a spatial understanding, you might go out, when you're going out to fix one item, there may be some preventive maintenance items that you could hit at the same job, on the same job. So, you know, travel to the thing that needs to be fixed occupies a bunch of time, and the more things you can do at that at the place where you're working, or the thing that has to be fixed, the more things you can do at that point, the better off you are. So just overall, won't go into this in a lot of detail in this session, but like I say, in the TCO session itself, we talk a lot about the definition, but it is a holistic approach. We've talked about that a little bit. It's a summation of all the known and estimated costs. You know, so there are a lot of things that go into that, and we'll talk about that some more certainly. And then it's the primary thing is being able to make good decisions. So that's what TCO is really all about. BIM is, whoops. There we go. Okay. BIM's about the same kind of thing, but it's really looking at, you know, getting a shared resource, having a reliable base. Again, it's decision making, it's life cycle, it's being able to, you know, go back and have a common place. You know, as I said earlier, if you have a work order, you know, make sure it gets back into the BIM before you close that work order. And as you know, BIM can be either a building information model, it can be the act of making models, or it can just managing information. The key element there is it's information. And you know, whether the B should be built environment, you know, that, you know, because like I say, BIM is kind of evolving now into a you know, horizontal as well as vertical construction. So infrastructure is getting to be a huge piece of it too. I talked a little bit about an information thread, and this is what I kind of mean there. What happens is we have, you know, again, we want to shift to what we call an information thread. Traditionally, we've kind of gone out and done planning, and then turned information over to design, turned information over to construction, and they turned some information maybe over to operations. Often what has to happen is you go out and recollect all the information. And so the information you have is kind of at the lowest common denominator. It's what information ultimately gets turned over through the plans or any documents that get turned over. What we want to push towards is an information thread where we continually collect information. You can still produce the drawings, you can still produce the products that you have traditionally produced in paper, but you don't lose any information. The focus is on the information. And so the benefit then is the space between those two curves. You know, it's having this information, not having to go out and recollect it or not get enough of it shifted over. And as I said, you know, it is a different way of thinking. It's a new approach. It's a culture change, and it is, you know, again, something that the organization has to go through. And of course, you know, one of the lines of thinking right now, with all the disruption that we have with the pandemic, you know, is this the perfect opportunity to go in and make some major changes? And you know, there's you know, of course, there's a lot of craziness in all aspects, but and nobody likes change at any time, but it's here. You know, we're having to cope with it, so it might be worth doing. And as I mentioned before, you know, the information is available electronically, so our challenge is to be able to capture it and keep it in a form that we can use. You've probably seen diagrams like this, and the thing is, they're different for every type of facility. But in general, you know, there's a cost that goes into design. There's a larger cost that goes into construction. There's a huge cost that goes into operations, and then there's also some cost that goes into disposal. Another way of looking at this, which I kind of like, is a diagram that we developed quite a few years ago. And again, you know, you have a small amount for your design, that's 6% we saw earlier. You have a little larger for construction. And those often we try to optimize or sub-optimize that. Those are our first costs. We try to, you know, sub-optimize those to get the price, you know, the design and the construction costs down to the minimum. But you know, that has a huge, the decisions you make early in design have a huge effect on your operational costs. You know, what you're paying every month for utilities or you know, any kind of operational cost. And those are more of what's traditionally looked at as life cycle costs. And we'll talk about, you know, the difference between life cycle cost and total cost here as we progress. But here's the first time we kind of look at it. And so all those things affect the occupant productivity. And that's really why the facility is being built. Or it could be infrastructure. You know, if you put in a new bridge, you're allowing somebody to get someplace faster than they would before, maybe, or better roads or whatever. You know, so it applies both, as I say, to horizontal as well as vertical construction. And the thing is, I'll reinforce this, that a little red dot just popped up inside of design cost. If you make a decision at the design phase, it can have huge ramifications throughout the whole facility. And if your facility is a, you know, a hospital or something like that, the societal benefit of that hospital is huge. And so that's really where we're ultimately looking, you know, as far as what the significance of all of this is. What I also, you know, so all of these things, you know, primarily the productivity of the people that are occupying the space that you've created, or the societal impact, that's really your total impact. And to be honest, total cost is kind of that first half of that. You know, it's not, it could be looked at as the total impact, but the numbers get kind of crazy when when you're really trying to look at societal impact or societal benefit. So I think, you know, keeping it kind of in the earlier phases of what total cost is makes a little more sense. Although I know that, you know, in doing total cost, and total cost has been around for a while. We haven't really applied it so much to the construction industry or the AECO industry for a while. It's been very popular in the IT industry for a while. There's a company called Gartner that does a really good job of total cost of ownership. They've been collecting data for quite a while, and which is another thing that I'd like to see happen in the construction industry, is that we do collect information on how people are doing with the different aspects of total cost, and that'll come in time, I suppose. Just going back and kind of looking at, again, you know, we've looked at a couple different ways, but here's a little bit slightly different way of looking at all of this. You know, we've got first cost, then we've also got what's traditionally looked at as life cycle cost, and typically, you know, that's the maintenance and operations and utility costs and things like that. It sometimes, yeah, life cycle cost doesn't really include first cost, but it should. Excuse me. So you know, everybody says, okay, well, that's, you know, then total cost is very similar to life cycle cost. But in fact, what life or total cost gets into is now looking at that renewal and recapitalization. And like I say, not necessarily just the cost of what the new pieces of equipment are, but what is it going to cost to install them? Because, you know, it's just like, an easy one is, you know, doing LED light bulbs, you know. It's really great with an LED light bulb because you don't have to change it. And you've got some situations where changing light bulbs can be a major problem of putting up scaffolding and all those kind of things. So that has, you know, the changing the light bulb is, the actual act of changing the light bulb is a lot more expensive than the light bulb itself. And the other thing that comes along that often isn't included in life cycle costs is, what is the impact on your organization, on your people that have to maintain it? Are they going to need additional people in order to bring a new facility online, or are you going to have situations where you have to have additional training? There's a lot of laboratory facilities out there and a lot of high-tech facilities that are being built that require a whole new skill set for the maintenance people to be able to maintain and sustain the project. So we've got environmental impacts. We've also got end-of-life issues that we have to consider. So that's really what total cost of ownership is in general. Again, another way of looking at it, kind of in a life cycle approach. And these, we've talked about all these things, so I won't spend a lot of time there. This is the formula, which just basically takes all those things that we just talked about in the two couple previous slides and identifies how that works in a formula. The other thing we've done is gone through and then put together a schema. You know, where does cost go? If you collect cost, where does it go? And there's a high level, you know, you can do it, work at the high level, you can work at the one level down. We also provide you a lot of information as far as breaking all those things down into a lot deeper level. And again, it could be on one facility, it could be your entire infrastructure, and you may need to prorate some of these things, like snow removal. You know, you're not going to necessarily have a contract to remove snow at one facility. It might be for your whole campus or your whole installation or portfolio or whatever. And so you might go through and do some kind of a proration for all the facilities that you have. But at least if you have a number, you have a place to put it, and that's what the schema concept is all about. So the overall TCO concept now, we've really kind of broken all the principles, the 13 principles, into 4 major categories. First is the foundation, which we talked about earlier, is building a strong asset management structure. Then what is the process of going out, finding the authoritative sources, gathering that information? Then how do you make sure that you have integrity of your information that you collect? And most of it is visibility. Having, you know, people that need to have access to that information, being able to see it. If they see there's an error, they can go in and fix it and things like that. And all of that will then lead to good decision making and having the information you need to be able to make decision. Not necessarily just the decisions for tomorrow, but for the next 25, 50, 100 years for your portfolios. So it again, as I say, it's not just on new projects, but it's also your overall facility and infrastructure spending plan, what your long-term impacts are, what interestingly enough, you can also go in and make planning or impact of what's going to happen if I don't meet these expenditures, and present that to management and say, you know, if we don't replace the roof this year, then when we have to do it in, you know, next year, that year after, we're going to also have to replace some roof deck. We may have to replace some, you know, do some repair work inside the facility where paint has to be repainted, or ceilings have to be replaced, and all those kind of things. So, you know, not replacing the roof this year is going to, not only because of a cost escalation, but you'll also have the situation where you might have additional damage that has to be done. So, you know, and then again, it's at what point in time do you have to make the decision, okay, we've been repairing this thing over and over, and you know, we can continue repairing it, but it's going to be less expensive to actually dispose it. So, you know, how do you maintain mission readiness and are available to be able to have the facility be able to support whatever your mission is, whether it's teaching kids or whether it's some other aspect. Getting into the use case concept a little bit more, I think we have to look at the what's happening. There's BIM project execution guide, and if you're doing BIM, hopefully you're using this. It's in the process of being updated, and Pennsylvania State University is doing that. They've identified, and they did identify in their first version of 25 different use cases. And what we've done in building smart, or in each of those use cases, they went through and put a business process together. And I talked about business processes earlier. You've got to be able to have these business processes. Then you can go through and use them. If they aren't working for you, you make adjustments to them for your own situation. What Building Smart International has done is taking those original 25 use cases that are in gray, and we've added some more related to design, some more related to procurement, and design, procure, assemble, and operate are the 4 phases that Building Smart has identified. Because, and I have another chart that's not in this presentation, but you know, we can't really internationally agree, we can't even in the United States agree on phasing of projects. So we simplified it up to the design, procure, assemble, and operate. But we also, assemble is like construction, so we got into more detail there, and we also got into some more detail in the operations phase. But what we've done in 2018 and 2019, and I'm sorry you can't read this too well, I can provide it if you need it. What I did was looked at these awards that the Building Smart International Awards Program, and we had 145 projects. And what we looked at is we went through and analyzed how many of the different use cases were being used in these different projects. And the ones we're interested in today are quantity takeoff, cost estimating, analysis estimating, the ASM, which is asset management, and TCO, total cost of ownership. As you can see, there's only 2 total cost of ownership examples, but they are out there. And I will say that what's exciting is that Building Smart International in 2019, all 50 use cases, we had examples of all 50 use cases, which is kind of amazing. I for a long time was concerned that we were only going to have clash detection and simulation as being BIM, and then we could have declared BIM done and moved on to something else. But I think what we're seeing now is that actually the people are understanding that this is much bigger. So what I've done also is mapped the TCO principles to the various use cases. Now, the concept here is to be able to capture information in a BIM and be able to then populate the TCO principles from that. So that's the kind of what's the intent of this chart is, to be able to say this is where you can get this information to be able to support the TCO effort. So if you're doing BIM, it's not a big step to go in and now also do TCO. And we've got definitions of all 50 use cases. I just brought, here's quantity takeoff, cost estimation, and total cost of ownership. Then I also hit design for maintenance, consistency, QC, QA, QC. Commissioning is another phase that's important, asset management, maintenance and repair, and these are the ones that were identified in that chart earlier. The other piece to look at is this is all this stuff fits together. All these different use cases fit together. And if you're just looking at like for design and construction, or design and procurement in this case, just how these different use cases feed information to the other aspects. So you've got your quantity takeoff. You're going to need that for specifications. You're just going to need what's included in the building, then doing your cost analysis and estimation, and then doing your total cost of ownership. And then you perform procurement and be able to capture additional information there about what model numbers and serial numbers and all those kind of things. So all this information starts coming together. Just to give you an idea that actually this all does work. And we've got some case studies that we've done. This is a punt sticker project, and I think it was 2018. Was one of the award winners in Building Smart. So we took it because it was only had 2 use cases, and we built some examples, some fact sheets as far as what was happening for two of the use cases that this project had. So we're now in the process of building several more. We've got some folks, some of the universities are capturing this information and putting it into these different fact sheets. In looking at 2018 awards, again, what we did was these are some of the projects that were included, and which ones had quantity takeoff, which ones had the estimating, which ones had TCO. As you can see, Zug Estates was the only one out of Switzerland that actually had a TCO and went through the whole process. But you can see also that the projects are from France, Germany, China, all over the world. And then this is the this is some of the evidence that was provided during the awards process, and that's the information we're using to be able to build these case studies from these projects. So this was for the TCO. And doing the quantity takeoff and things like that. And so, different examples they had. So again, I keep talking about all these things relating to each other, and this is really how this happens. We've got the TCO standard. It is, ultimately the way we're going to do total cost of ownership in the United States, but it's supported by and related to ISO 55000, which is asset management. ISO 41000, which is facility management, 2 big standards. You're probably a lot of you are probably looking at TCO, or excuse me, at ISO 55000. But these others are out there too, and I wanted to just at least to make you aware of how they all relate to each other. Service life is kind of the TCO in ISO terms. Doesn't get into as much detail as the APPA TCO standard does, and that's why it's important to really look at the APPA TCO standard. But then that ties into location, it ties into unique identifiers, it ties into performance, and there's another product out there called ICMS2, which is also, it's not an ISO standard, but it's been developed by multiple countries. You get into audits, you get into if you look at service life, part 4 of service life gets into industry foundation classes, which is the open standard for BIM, and you get it, which is ISO 16739, and then that ties into things like COBE. It ties into 12006 for framework classification. You get into OmniClass, which a lot of you know OmniClass as being master format and uniformat. Those all fit into OmniClass. And then you have information management, 16950 or 19650, excuse me, which is another big standard out there. And then also the Building Smart Data Dictionary, which again ties all these different data elements together. So we do have a lot of data elements that we've identified in the standard, and the key element and importance of this is that you can go out and contract for data. That's something you can absolutely put in your contract, and you can get it and validate it that's, it's been data received and it's accurate and things like that. You can check it against and things like when you do COBE, you can use COBie to populate your CMMS and iWIMS products and things like that. You know, the Maximos and those kind of things. You can get into, you know, having common data across multiple projects. So if you're asking for these things on all the projects that you do, you'll be able to start comparing different buildings and what information you have on those different buildings. What's really cool is that APPA has just set up a TCO data element database, be able to go out and search these different data elements, and provides all the information. You can search it, and you can sort them, you can do all kinds of, you know, make it easier to be able to get to the different data elements and find out what's in them. So that's a product that just came out. I'm not sure that it's linked every place yet, but you can go out and search it and find it on the APPA website. So there's a lot of work going on in the background trying to get all this stuff together, to be honest. And that's kind of where you know, a lot of this is really getting into is being able to again, you know, go out and get the standard member. Obviously, if you're a member, it's a lot less expensive. And these are all these what goes into the two parts. There's application framework, all the terms and principles. It is important to get both, to be honest, because you really need to understand the principles first, and then we kind of apply those principles in the implementation in part two, and also get into the relationships of data elements and personas and how all the standards relate to each other and everything too. So most of the stuff, a good portion of the things that we've been talking about today so far are covered or mentioned certainly in the standard. And you know, we've had a chance now, it's been out there for a little while, and have a chance to read through it, and as we try to put together some education stuff for it, you know, it's really holding together pretty well. Anna and I have both been kind of commented that said, you know, this actually committee did a great job in putting all this together. So so we are looking at how to provide additional education. We're talking about trying to, you know, we had a plan to go out and do all this, and then the pandemic hit. In fact, San Diego, we did a initial course and at the conference, and I think it was like 2 weeks or so after that, then everything shut down. So we're now trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this in a COVID environment, do it all remotely, and you know, be able to give everybody enough information to be able to go out and implement this. And you know, is it something that we're going to have kind of one-on-one or one-on-one relationship with each organization, or do we do a 101 course that you know, can involve everybody? There's a lot of other stuff that's out there. You know, Doug Christensen certainly was the one that kind of got this whole thing started and got us all into this. And unfortunately, you know, with his passing, but I did go back and find an article that back in 2009. So again, we've been working on this for a little while. This is not something new. But this was an article that I know, you know, this whole thing of talking, and that was one of the things that Doug really thought about a lot about the relationships between BIM and TCO. So I'm really happy to be able to present this today and kind of you know, build on some of the things that he got started. And I put together, I know, some of the graphics, and we had some collaboration in putting this together back in 2009. So so we've been working on this for a while, and probably most of you read the Gifts That Keep on Taking, but it's a great read as far as getting to understand a lot of the background of this. And then Cameron just recently, you know, it started with Doug and published his book, and I guess that should have popped out on the front, but it's certainly also accessible to everybody. I just want to also mention that we've got another group that's looking at developing BIM talent, and because that's, and of course that really kind of, TCO kind of fits under that umbrella in my mind anyway. But we've got 70 universities that are out there working on trying to understand how we change education to be able to support and create those T-shaped learners that we were talking about earlier. We have a body of knowledge that we put together, and we have a group called the AIC, and you can go out and grab that. It's on a website. What we've looked at is design, construction, facility management, in consultants, and we've looked at entry level, mid-career level, full performance level. We've looked at individual overall organizations as well as project, how you plan it, how you coordinate it, how you manage it, and how you do it. You can also go. I've got a book that's still out there on Amazon on building information modeling, which, interestingly enough, we talked about a lot of that, a lot of the stuff in there. And also interesting is that it's still selling quite a few copies. Came out, was one of the first ones that came out along with BIM Handbook that Chuck Eastman put out there. And then we just finished one. The cover's not available yet, but we just finished one that's going to be out in March on actually developing BIM talent with several other pretty notable people, and I think it's going to be an interesting read also, and you can pre-order that on Amazon. And with that, I will ask, say that we're kind of to the end of the presentation. Hopefully, we have some questions, and I also either contact me or Anna. She'd be more than happy to talk to you about any of these things. And we are work together closely on this whole process. I'm the BIM guy, so that's why I did this presentation today. But certainly, couldn't have done any of this without her. And with that, that concludes the AIA continuing education course. So I'll open it back up to Billy and see if there are any questions I can address.
Yes, we have a couple questions. First question is, how does BIM integrate with work order ticket systems, if at all? I'm thinking of larger organizations like colleges, corporations with large campuses, locations across country, world, etc.
Okay, and the probably the best aspect of that would be in I don't know if you're familiar with COBE, Construction Operations Building Information Exchange, and what that does is it captures information during design, adds to it during construction, and then the intent is to populate your IWIMS products, your CMMS and things like that, the Maximos. So when you have the information coming from COBE, and COBE is populated also through BIM. So then that's where you're capturing the information to be able to provide it to your tool that you're going to use to be able to support your work order system. So that's the link and how that information flows into that. So it's like I say, it's kind of a combination of all these things working together to be able to, again, get that information that you need and not have to go out and collect it as a separate task to be able to put into your Maximo or Tririga or whatever product that you're, and there's probably 20 or 30, so I shouldn't just mention one brand or another, because there's a lot of really good products, and I'm sure a lot of universities are using many of those. And COBE will support most of the major, and the category that they put it in is called IWIMS. Can't remember what IWIMS necessarily stands for, right? Integrated Work something management systems. I think it's integrated work. I don't know what it's, work package, workforce, workplace, something like that. Management system. So and that's what all those come under that category. And so a lot of the BIM software, most of the major BIM software will read and write COBE, and then so you're capturing the information during the BIM process, you're feeding it back out then to the IWIMS software, which is what you're using as your basis to be able to do your work orders. So hopefully that answered that question. Sure.
Besides Revit, are there other BIM systems that are not drawing-based available?
That aren't drawing-based. I think COBE would probably be the key element there. That's really it's not drawing-based necessarily, but and Revit isn't the only BIM package either. There's quite a few that are out there. And then you also, a key element too is that there's a lot of other packages that are not that are used during construction and things like that, in all the different phases of the project. And there's certainly other packages other than just the iWIM packages. You know, there are a lot of software tools out there for supporting asset management in general. And so you've got, you know, you really, in a lot of this, you have to approach this from, what do I want to do, you know, in my organization? What items do I want to maintain as in my asset management system? Excuse me, take a drink. And what you have to decide that first, and then you should go out and find your software. Software should be kind of the second step. And I know we've seen situations where, you know, we see the BIM products maturing over time, and it started out that some of the major BIM products didn't necessarily support all aspects of the life cycle. And so, you know, people would say, oh, well, you know, BIM doesn't support this part of it. Well, that version, you know, that company's version didn't support it. But other people were being very successful. And a lot of times, and as you go into international community, there's a lot of other software tools that are being used in these different products that are being, you know, the different projects we see coming in Building Smart International. And you know, there's certainly, even in the United States, there's, you know, Bentley and Graphisoft and things like that. But then you get into other countries, and there are a lot of other products too. So you know, and they're all available to everybody. I mean, you know, they're out there for. So I think the key element is, like I say, initially go in and find what you want to try to accomplish, and then find the software tools that best support that. And even you know, Revit is now turning into BIM 360. So you know, that's kind of the next, if you will, kind of the next version of even from Autodesk. So everything continues to improve and over time. So you can't get married to one software package. I kind of look at it as going back when I learned how to first word process using WordStar, and then I used Multimate, and then I used WordPerfect, and ultimately, you know, and back when, you know, when those first three were in place, Word was really not a very good product. Word improved and kind of took over for the others, and everybody uses Word now. So, you know, that's not to say something else won't come along in the future that it's going to be better. You know, you just have to kind of recognize that things will change over time. So. But I think Kobe's.
Thank you. We have time for one more quick question.
Okay.
Can you give an overall perspective of the connection to GIS?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things, it's probably IFC is probably the key element that connects those two, and Building Smart International is working on that aspect. In talking to Jack Dangerman, well, quite a few years ago now, that we had actually in our when I was working with the National Institute of Building Sciences, we used to produce we had a journal that we did, the BIM journal, and we did a series where we started out and talked about how BIM and GIS work together. So you can probably find that. If you want to write me, I can tell you which edition it was in. But we did a nice job and kind of finished up with, and Jack Dangerman was actually our keynote speaker that year. And one of the things that Jack committed to me, that they would support IFC. So IFC is included in Esri and those products that, and in the GIS world, Esri is probably the kind of the number one GIS tool, where, you know, that's not necessarily the case in BIM and other areas. And we don't even know who's going to necessarily develop software for TCO yet, but there are some people, I think, working on it. So I guess with that was the last question, huh?
Well, we have more questions. We just don't have time to get to them. And for those questions we did not get to, yep, I will be sending them to Deke. Deke will reach out to the person who ask the question. And the presentation slides will be available. Deke will send those to me here shortly, and you will get those in an email from me either later today or first thing tomorrow morning. So with that, I'd like to thank our presenter, Deke. Deke, as always, great presentation. To our attendees, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Thank you so much. Be safe, stay healthy. Until next time, good afternoon.
Thank you all.